Hi, this is Greg. This video discusses case management delivery options, both pre-COVID and post-COVID. Now, pre-COVID, the standard was face-to-face, and it was based on a specific time, duration, and frequency that was tied to the risk level of the client. 60 minutes for high risk, 45 minutes for medium or moderate, and 15 minutes every 4 weeks for low risk. That was the standard on evidence-based practice. The interesting thing is that successful outcomes were dependent on the training and equipping of the case manager. It was dependent on the specific time, duration, and frequency matched to the risk level. It also required a motivated client who could fit into the time frame demanded, and there had to be a good relationship. The therapeutic relationship between the case manager and the client were really important and were built on face-to-face contacts. Now, in the post-COVID world, case management required some physical distance. A lot of people call it social distance, but it's actual physical distance. So in face-to-face versus remote, we have two words that are familiar in our vocabulary: proximal and distal. Proximal means I'm close in the same location. Distal means distance, I'm separated. And so in a remote setting, a distal setting, I'm going to use video, I'm going to use email, I'm going to use the phone, and I could use text or chat. Now, in a distal setting, this remote delivery of case management, there are two processes. One is synchronous and one is asynchronous. Synchronous means that people respond in real time or immediately. Asynchronous means they respond when they have time. For example, chat, video, and phone, we're talking back and forth. That's synchronous delivery. Asynchronous would be email or text, where I get time to respond and I respond on my own time. Typically, emails, we think of a 24-hour, maximum, and text is usually like an hour maximum, but it's not in real time. So when I'm trying to develop a case plan, these are 9 things I think you need to have in a case plan. You need to understand criminal history. You need to understand the protective factors that are actually positives for the client. Also, the criminogenic needs, which are viewed primarily as negative. The change or motivation potential within the client. I think you need to know the criminal thinking levels, the deception levels, and the cognition levels of that client, as well as the client's learning style using what we would commonly call a VARK method. And then the sentient factors say, can this person change in and of themselves, or are they living in an environment where change is not going to be possible? All 9 of these things you need to know to build a case plan. So in the pre-COVID-19 world, we did proximal face-to-face things, and it was a standard format. I collect data, I design a case plan, and I begin case management. That was kind of the process that we used, and it's worked well for a long time. But all of a sudden, COVID came along, and we had to run to some remote distal delivery concepts. So how do I collect data in a distal setting? How do I design a case plan? Well, I have to use a synchronous method. Is it possible that I can use chat and video and phone to get this information? Yeah, it is possible. It's a little harder, and we need to be trained on how to do it. But the post-COVID world is demanding a different method. So let's assume a couple of things. You have a high-risk client. You have an effective case plan developed. You've put it together. It's really good. And now you need to make a decision on how to deliver the case management. Is it going to be proximal or distal? Is this going to be a face-to-face, or I'm going to use remote methods to communicate? Let's also assume that case management is your primary delivery method for CBTs. In most community corrections settings, this is your primary programming, case management. Let's assume that EPICS is your case management format. Check-in, review, intervention, next steps, and that you're all using this format to deliver the interventions. And let's assume that you're following evidence-based practice for timeframes, which would mean for a high risk, we're requiring a weekly meeting of 45 to 60 minutes in length. We are delivering an intervention using an EPICS format, and it's our primary method of creating change and partnering with this person in change. So in that setting, in case management high risk, here's some options in terms of how you could deliver case management. Week 1, you could meet face-to-face. In fact, it's possible when you see the whole delivery method that week 2 could be video. Week 3 could be phone. Week 4 could be video. And then it's supported with at least 2 times a week email reminders and updates, work that needs to be done in between. But notice the time frames. This could be done where you only have one face-to-face contact a month and you are limiting the exposure in a COVID situation. You're monitoring the health situations. So this is what we would call a hybrid method of delivery. I'm seeing the person one time face-to-face, but the rest of the time I'm in a distal setting using technology. So how would that help? Well, for the case manager and the client, having a detailed plan worked out in a specific meeting schedule is going to be very helpful. Two, it makes remote work possible. Just got word today with one of the community corrections I work with, they're going to have to move back to remote work. On the client side, it limits travel. So the convenience is a lot better for them. There are some challenges that we'll talk about when we look at the research here, but this has a huge positive impact. It limits face-to-face contact, and in a COVID world where we're trying to physically distance to eliminate health issues, it communicates that. Time is maximized for the case manager, and it's convenient. In fact, one of the things you have to talk about is what's the time frames? How is remote delivery of case management different in terms of time frame? How long is too long? And the convenience for the client is huge. We'll talk about that when we get to some of the research. For the case manager, you have the consistency of meetings. You know exactly what your plan looks like every month, and you can schedule and get your lesson plans laid out. What we discover in the research is that when we use remote delivery methods, there's fewer missed appointments on the part of the client. So there is some benefit here. So for case management, high risk, moderate risk, low risk, I've got to decide, am I going to do proximal or distal delivery? And for some of you, you won't have a decision. You will have to do distal delivery because COVID is going to require that we have to have remote methods. And many of you will use a hybrid model where you may see them in a limited face-to-face exposure, but most of the time you will be doing remote delivery. So for further conversation, if we're going to go to a remote distal delivery of case management, we're going to have new checklists. The checklists for face-to-face have specific targets in them, and we're going to have to develop new checklists for remote delivery. We're going to have to determine timeframes. I'm not sure that the research supports that I can do a 45 to 60 minute video or phone conversation just like I'm doing face-to-face. When I involve technology, the timeframes need to be adjusted, and you as a community corrections agency are going to have to determine what those timeframes are. And then I believe we need to create a resource library for a curriculum. I don't believe that all the curriculums we're currently using in face-to-face delivery of case management actually work the same way when I'm using a remote distal delivery method. So these are some conversations that you may want to have in the future.